I love cooking a prime rib or any kind of meat actually. Hi, I'm Sebastian Cortez from Sebastian Co Fine Meats, and today we're doing a prime rib roast. A very unique way of cooking it, which is low temperature for a longer time. And we're gonna be working with a dry aged roast. We're gonna talk about that a little bit as well. And this is it. So this is a 45 days age, dry aged Canada prime rib roast. You can see it's got a little bit of a dark color onto it. It's got a really kind of nice, nutty, buttery smell to it, and the flavor's gonna be along those lines as well. When you choose a roast, you definitely want to look for mainly the marbling. You don't want anything that is like super lean, because the marbling is what gives you that flavor. Every little speck of fat, when it melts, it's just gonna create a pocket of just liquid flavor into it. Because this is dry aged, I like to trim it a little bit. This is sort of like a crust that it forms and protects the meat from going bad. You know, looking at this roast, you wanna look into this piece of meat right here on the prime rib, and that is called the fat cap or the decal. It's by far the most tender and most flavorful part of the prime rib. So whenever you look for a prime rib, make sure you get a big piece of fat cap on it. It's trimmed this guy a little bit, so we take a bit of the age. If you come to our store, of course we'll do all this for you, but if you end up doing some kind of dry aging at home, you want to remove this little crust. And then we take a little bit of the fat on the outside as well. So I'm basically removing the whole layer of dry age. Now this one I've already cut it on the bandsaw, so we took off the nice crust that was on both sides. Cutting down, you still definitely want to leave a little bit of fat on it. This is a 2-bone prime rib roast. This will easily serve 4 to 5 people. Carving, it's always been a little bit of an issue. So I want to show you guys an easy way of carving this. We're going to semi-remove the bones. You want the bones in the roast for flavor. That's what gives you a lot of the flavor, and the fat on the other side, right? So if you take your knife, and you're gonna see there's like the 2 bones right there, and the bones are sort of like curved a little bit, right? So you wanna take your knife, curve it down, so you follow those bones all the way down. Now don't remove all the way. So you just wanna go all the way to the end, just before the bones are falling apart. You could put a little rub, which I'm gonna do. I'm gonna show you how to do a wet rub, which I really like. And you can put the rub in between the bone, the meat. We're gonna flip it back close and tie it up. The wet rub, I like wet rubs because, I don't know, that's how I grew up. My mom used to actually marinate all the roast with this super simple recipe. So you're gonna take some garlic. It's gotta be kind of rustic because you wanna see those chunks of burnt garlic on the roast once it comes out of the oven. We're gonna use some nice coarse Italian style ground black pepper. So most black pepper that you get is 32 mesh. This one's called Italian, so it's a little bit more coarse, right? It's got a little bit of texture to it. Again, it also looks really nice on your roast. I like using a little bit of cumin and oregano, some South American, and I love those sort of like Latin flavors. And then we're gonna splash a little champagne vinegar in there. You can use white vinegar if you want. I like champagne, it's a little bit more, not as sharp and a little bit sweeter. Mix it all up. And we finish it off with a little bit olive oil, which I have Sebastian Co olive oil right here, my favorite olive oil. Just like that, mix it all up, and a good amount of salt. So one of my favorite flavors for meat, it's always like having something that is a little bit salty and acidic. So now we're using Sebastian Co butcher salt, which is really good. It's an extra dry Atlantic sea salt. And it should taste kind of like, you know, kind of tangy and salty. I'm gonna put a little bit more salt in that. Now, here's the cool thing. We're gonna put this into the roast. So you can put a little bit on the inside of that cavities. And as you can see, it's a bit of a chunky marinade. Rub it all around. I'm gonna show you how to tie it first. There's a couple ways of tying. I mean, the butcher's knot is like a slip knot. You take your 2 fingers in here, flip it. There's a little loop in there, you put it in through. Make sure it's nice and snug, and then you just start pulling down, right? And I like to kind of like line it up on the bones, because if you squeeze hard where the bones are, it's not gonna cut in through the meat. So you bring it forward, and there you go. Another one you can do, really simple, it's another type of slip knot, which you go underneath the roast, and you make a loose, very simple knot, just like that. And you make a second one, same thing, kind of loose, but don't tie it all the way. Now you pull this, and pull that one down, and it's gonna lock itself in place as well. And another knot that you can do, sort of like the same idea, but give it a really tight squeeze, and you want to kind of lift the meat a little bit so it's kind of locked in place, and then you do a second one right on top. So there you go. There's 3 different types of knots. And why do we tie it? So that's the whole thing. We tie the roast because when the meat is cooking in the oven, it's basically, as it's cooking, the meat is kind of compressing itself. Once you remove it out of the heating element, whether it's the oven or the barbecue, the meat needs to relax. And that's when you cut all the strings off. So you cut all the strings, you have the roast completely constrained in the strings, and once you cut them off, it starts relaxing and absorbing all the juices back in. So for a roast about this size, I'll probably give it maybe about 10 minutes of resting time, and then you can carve it. So as soon as it comes out of the oven, cut the strings, let it rest. You don't have to cover it on tinfoil. I usually just leave it out in the open and then start slicing up. And then you can see how it's gonna be perfect medium rare all the way through. I love cooking a prime rib or any kind of meat actually at very low temperatures. So what happens when you cook meat at low temperature, and I'm talking like, people are gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm talking about 225, 240, for maybe about 3 to 4 hours. And what happens when you cook the meat really nice and slow, you don't get that well done ring on the outside. So basically, the lower the temperature and the longer the time, the smaller that well done ring on the roast is gonna be. So that way you can get medium rare from the edge all the way to the center. You can go anywhere between 225 to 300 degrees. You can even cook at 350, which is the standard temperature for prime rib, but give this a try. Try it at a lower temperature and you'll be surprised. So this is gonna go in the oven right now. We're gonna make a chimichurri. Okay, so now we're gonna make a chimichurri. So chimichurri is basically South America's barbecue sauce, kind of, or not really. It's basically sort of like a very sharp, almost like pesto with no basil, of course. Generally, we use parsley, cilantro, and oregano. I always like using fresh oregano. I find this is sort of like the main little secret for a good chimichurri. Fresh oregano, unlike dry oregano, has a little bit of a peppery bite to it, and it's very simple. So basically, we're gonna start with shallots. Okay, we're gonna dice those really fine. It's almost like, this is called a brunoise cut, and it's just very tiny little dice. Okay. Perfect. So we got that in there. The rest of our black pepper. I like it a little spicy. I put a little bit of tomato because it gives it a bit of consistency. Slice the tomato as small as possible. So we'll want to put that in there. And now the main ingredients, which is cilantro and parsley. Again, as fine as possible. So basically you're making a sauce. You're making a sauce by knife. So we do parsley now. And it's half and half. I like doing half parsley, half cilantro. Okay, now we do the oregano, fresh oregano. Now with the oregano, you gotta make sure you remove the stems. The stems are a little bit too strong in flavor, so I just go like that. If they're tender stems, you can put them in. And for the oregano, it's kind of like a quarter, so you don't put a lot of it in there. Got a little garlic cloves in there. Another trick that you can do, I like doing this too, you can use a little bit of salt. We gotta put salt in the chimichurri anyways, and you can make a little bit of a paste with the garlic rice, so it's kind of a little bit creamier. We're gonna add a little bit of lemon juice and some vinegar as well. And then we top it off, again, with some nice olive oil. I like using the Spanish olive oil. And that is basically your chimichurri. Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. So here we go. This is our prime rib roast. Just came out of the oven. So what we gotta do now, as I mentioned, we're going to cut up all the strings in here. So now we're gonna let it rest, right? And then for a roast about this size, I think probably about 10 minutes is more than enough. All right, so now that the roast has been rested for about 10 minutes, remember I mentioned we take the bones out. Look how easy it is to open that up, right? Get the bones right out, and then we're gonna start carving our prime rib roast. There we go. Perfect. Now you can see there's no well done ring on the outside. It's all medium rare pretty much all the way through. And then you get a little bit of that chimichurri. Sprinkle it right on there. And I always like to hit it with a little bit of salt because it's such a big roast. You don't necessarily get a lot of the saltiness flavor on the inside of the meat. So if you guys want to try some good quality meat, please come and visit Sebastian Co. We got 2 locations now, and what sets us apart, we have this really cool dry aging program where we have a massive meat locker, and you can come and purchase a rib or a short loin, pay in advance, and it's gonna be sitting there for you whenever you have a party. We cut little pieces, and then you can kind of get to know a little bit of what the dry aging flavor does, because you can come and get your meat 2 weeks age, and then you can come at about a month or 45 days or whatever you want. So if you want to do a dinner like this and cook the perfect prime rib roast, check us out at the store.